She decided to assert her absolute dominance over me in the exact moment the digital display on the elevator wall hit 8:50 p.m., freezing the glass cabin 50 floors above the glittering grid of the city, and I will never forget the way Victoria Sterling looked at me, cold, terrified, and ravenous, while the board of directors waited 10 floors above to strip her of her empire. It was a suspension of time and gravity that defied every corporate policy I had signed my name to. I was 24, a junior executive assistant who had spent the last 2 years fetching coffee and organizing spreadsheets for the most powerful woman in the tech industry. Victoria was 48, the Iron Lady of Silicon Valley, a woman who wore Italian suits like armor and whose gaze could drop a company's stock price by 10 points. To the world, she was untouchable, a machine of efficiency and profit. But in that suspended glass box, dangling over the abyss of the metropolis, the machine malfunctioned. She didn't just stop the elevator, she stopped the world, creating a vacuum where the only oxygen available was the tension crackling between us. The ascent had started normally. We were late. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 9 p.m., a coup orchestrated by Simon Blackwood to oust her as CEO. The air in the elevator was thick with the scent of her expensive jasmine perfume and the metallic tang of high-voltage anxiety. I was reading the briefing notes aloud, my voice shaking slightly, trying to prepare her for the slaughter upstairs. "Blackwood has the votes from the European sector, Mrs. Sterling," I stammered, staring at the tablet. "If we don't sway the undecided members." She didn't answer. She reached out, her hand slamming against the red emergency stop button. The elevator shuddered violently and groaned to a halt. The sudden silence was deafening, amplified by the hum of the cooling fans and the blood rushing in my ears. I looked up, terrified. "Mrs. Sterling? The meeting? We can't stop." Victoria turned to me slowly. Her face was pale, her usual mask of composure slipping to reveal a raw, desperate hunger. She took the tablet from my hands and tossed it onto the glass floor, the screen cracking slightly. "They want to eat me alive, Alex," she whispered, her voice trembling with a rage I had never seen. "I need to clear my head. I need to feel something other than fear before I walk into that room." She advanced on me, forcing me back until my shoulder blades hit the cold, transparent wall of the elevator. Behind me, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red, a dizzying drop that made my stomach churn. "Victoria," I breathed, using her first name for the first time, a transgression that felt as dangerous as the height. "There are cameras. The security desk." She didn't care. She reached up and loosened my tie, her knuckles grazing my throat, her touch burning hot against my skin. "The camera has a blind spot in the corner," she murmured, stepping between my legs, her body pressing against mine, radiating a heat that fogged the glass behind me. "And as for security, let them watch. Let them see what it takes to run this company." She wasn't asking for comfort. She was demanding submission. She needed an anchor, something physical and real to ground her before the storm upstairs. She grabbed my hair, pulling my head down, and kissed me, not with romance, but with a bruising, frantic intensity that tasted of coffee and adrenaline. It was a transfer of power. She was draining my youth to fuel her war. "BZZZT." The intercom speaker overhead crackled to life, shattering the moment. "Mrs. Sterling?" The voice of the head of security boomed through the small space. "We register a mechanical stoppage in car 4. Are you safe? We are dispatching a technical team." I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. Victoria pulled back an inch, her lips swollen, her eyes dark and dilated. She didn't panic. She didn't step away. She kept her hand firmly on my chest, pinning me to the glass, her nails digging into my shirt. She reached out with her other hand and held down the talk button, her voice instantly transforming into the icy, commanding tone of the CEO. "Negative, control," she lied smoothly, staring straight into my eyes while her hips ground slowly, deliberately against mine. "I dropped a confidential file. The sensor must have tripped. Give me 2 minutes to retrieve it. Do not send anyone. I am restarting the system manually." She released the button. The silence returned, heavier than before. 2 minutes, Alex," she whispered, dropping to her knees, her hands working at my belt with feverish speed. "Make me forget them. Make me invincible." The next 120 seconds were a blur of sensory overload, the vibration of the suspended cabin, the cold glass against my back, and the terrifying, intoxicating heat of the most powerful woman in the city unraveling me. When she finally stood up, she was breathless but composed. She fixed her hair in the reflection of the steel doors, smoothed her skirt, and looked at me. The fear was gone from her eyes, replaced by a razor-sharp clarity. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her security badge, a platinum card that opened every door in the building. She peeled the adhesive backing off a visitor sticker and slapped it over the camera lens in the corner, blinding the digital eye. "Tuck your shirt in, Alex," she commanded, her voice back to its professional steel. "And wipe that lipstick off your neck. We have a board to destroy." She hit the run button. The elevator lurched upward, the gravity returning, pulling us toward the 50th floor. The doors chimed softly and slid open. The lobby of the executive floor was silent, lined with marble and hostility. And standing right there, waiting for us with a shark-like grin, was Simon Blackwood. He was flanked by 2 other board members, checking his watch. He looked at the elevator, then at Victoria, and finally, his gaze landed on me. I was standing behind her, clutching my tablet, trying to look invisible, but my face was flushed, and my tie was slightly askew. Simon's eyes narrowed. He saw the energy radiating off us, the undeniable current of what had just happened. "Victoria," he drawled, stepping forward to block her path. "You're late. We were just discussing your lack of stamina for the job." He looked at me again, a sneer curling his lip. "And you brought your assistant? I hope he's prepared to take notes on your resignation." Victoria didn't flinch. She stepped out of the elevator, the heels I had just held in my hands clicking lethally on the floor. She smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who had just fed. "Actually, Simon," she said, her voice echoing in the hall, "Alex isn't here to take notes. He's here to watch me bury you." The transition from the intimacy of the elevator to the sterile, freezing battlefield of the main boardroom was a shock to the system, like plunging into ice water after a fever dream. The room was a vast, soundproofed aquarium of glass and steel, dominated by a 20-foot oval table that looked more like a runway than a place for discussion. 20 pairs of eyes, the board members, the investors, the vultures, fixed on Victoria as she took her place at the head of the table. I sat to her left, the dutiful assistant, my hands trembling slightly as I arranged her water glass and files. Simon Blackwood sat directly opposite, his smile sharp and predatory, spinning a gold Mont Blanc pen between his fingers. He had sabotaged the audio-visual system. I knew it the moment Victoria began her presentation. The massive screen behind her flickered, turned blue, and then died, cutting off the revenue charts that were her main defense. "Technical difficulties, Victoria?" Simon drawled, his voice oily with mock sympathy. "Perhaps if you spent less time in elevators and more time on infrastructure, we wouldn't be flying blind." The room murmured in agreement. Victoria didn't flinch. She looked down at me, her eyes flashing a silent, desperate command. "Alex," she said, her voice calm but authoritative, "the hardline connection under the table is loose. Fix it. Now!" I knew what she was doing. There was no loose cable. She was buying time, and she was putting me in the only place where I couldn't be seen, and where she could reach me. I slid off my chair and crawled beneath the massive, frosted glass table. It was a different world down there, a dim, carpeted cave protected by a canopy of expensive suits and the hum of the floor vents. The air smelled of shoe polish and static electricity. I pretended to fiddle with the server box mounted in the floor, my heart hammering against my ribs. Above me, the war resumed. Victoria launched into her speech without the slides, her voice gaining strength, reciting figures from memory. But then, the environment shifted. I saw her feet, encased in lethal black stilettos, shift on the carpet. Slowly, deliberately, she slipped her right foot out of the shoe. The arch of her foot was high, encased in sheer black nylon. She didn't put it back in. She extended her leg, seeking me out in the gloom. Her toes brushed my knee, a shocking, electric contact that nearly made me drop the screwdriver I was holding. She wasn't just checking if I was there. She was claiming her territory. While she decimated Simon's argument about the Asian market expansion above the table, below the surface, her foot slid higher, moving up my thigh with a possessive, rhythmic pressure. It was a maddening dichotomy. To the board, she was the Iron Lady, untouchable and cold. To me, she was a woman seeking a physical anchor, using my body to ground herself against the assault. I froze, terrified that the movement would be visible through the frosted glass, but the center of the table was opaque enough to hide our sins. Her toes pressed firmly into the sensitive muscle of my inner thigh, digging in whenever Simon interrupted her, relaxing when she regained the upper hand. It was a silent language of stress and release. I abandoned the pretense of the cables and placed my hand on her ankle, gripping it, offering her the support she couldn't ask for aloud. She leaned into my touch, her voice above growing sharper, more confident. I was the battery, and she was drawing every ounce of power I had. "I don't need a slide deck to tell you that Blackwood's projections are amateur at best," she declared, her heel digging into my leg to punctuate the insult. "I built this infrastructure. I know where the weak points are." The tension snapped. Simon, furious at being outmaneuvered, slammed his hand on the table. "You're hiding something, Victoria," he shouted. In his anger, he swiped his arm, and his heavy gold pen flew off the edge of the table. It hit the carpet with a soft thud and rolled. It didn't stop. It rolled past the table legs. It rolled right toward me. "My pen," Simon muttered. I saw his expensive Italian leather Oxford shift. He was pushing his chair back. He was bending down. Panic seized me. If he looked under the table, he wouldn't just see his pen. He would see me, disheveled, gripping the CO's ankle, with her shoe discarded nearby. It would be the end of her career in my life. I saw Simon's face begin to dip below the horizon of the table edge. "Don't bother, Simon." Victoria's voice cracked like a whip, freezing him in place. She kicked her shoe back toward her with lightning speed, missing my face by an inch, and shoved her foot into it. Simultaneously, she dropped her own laser pointer on the floor, but on the other side of her chair, away from me. "Alex is already down there dealing with your incompetence. He'll get it." She kicked me, hard in the shin. The signal. I grabbed the pen and the laser pointer. I scrambled out from under the table on her side, flushed, hair messy, clutching the items like trophies. I stood up, gasping for air, thrusting the gold pen toward Simon. "Your pen, Mr. Blackwood," I said, my voice shaking. "And the connection is stable." Simon looked at me, his eyes narrowing. He looked at my flushed face, then at Victoria, who was coolly sipping water, though her chest was rising and falling rapidly. He knew something had happened. He just couldn't prove it. The suspicion in his eyes was lethal. Victoria stood up abruptly. "The screen is dead, but the point is made," she announced, checking her watch. "We'll reconvene in 20 minutes for the final vote. I need to review the proxy statements." She turned to me, her eyes dark and burning with unresolved adrenaline. She didn't say good job. She handed me a thick file folder. "Alex, bring the backup drive to my office. The private line." She walked out, her hips swaying with a new, dangerous cadence. I looked down at the folder she had given me. It wasn't a backup drive. Clipped to the inside was a sticky note with a single word written in her sharp, angular handwriting: "Lock." And below it, the code to her all-glass corner office. The door to Victoria's corner office hissed shut behind us, engaging the magnetic lock with a reassuring thud, but the room offered no real sanctuary. It was a crystalline cage of glass suspended over the city, a transparent box where privacy was an illusion bought with power. The lights were dimmed, leaving us illuminated only by the ambient glow of the monitors and the sprawling, golden grid of the metropolis 50 floors below. Victoria didn't sit behind her desk. She didn't check her emails. She dropped the file folder I had handed her onto the floor, the papers fanning out like a white surrender flag, and pushed me backward until my legs hit the edge of her massive leather guest chair. "Sit," she commanded, her voice vibrating with a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. I obeyed, sinking into the plush leather, and before I could speak, she was there. She didn't kneel. She stepped between my spread legs and sat across my lap, straddling me, her skirt riding up her thighs, her weight settling onto me with a possessive, claiming gravity. It was a breach of every professional boundary in existence, yet it felt like the only logical conclusion to the night. "You were good down there, Alex," she whispered, her hands framing my face, her thumbs tracing the line of my jaw. "You kept me grounded. I could feel you trembling, but you didn't run." The view was dizzying, not just the drop outside the window, but the woman in my arms. The CEO of Sterling Tech, the woman who commanded billions, was grinding her hips against me in a dark office, seeking a release from the crushing pressure of her existence. "They want to take this from me," she murmured, leaning her forehead against mine, her breath hot on my skin. "Blackwood. The board. They think I'm too old, too solitary. They think a woman without a family has no legacy." She pulled back to look at me, her eyes searching mine for validation. "But I have this building. I have this view. And right now." She kissed me, a slow, deep, terrifyingly intimate kiss that tasted of expensive whiskey and desperation. "Right now I have you." I wrapped my arms around her waist, pulling her closer, surrendering to the madness. We were exposed to the entire city, two silhouettes framed in glass, acting out a forbidden play on the highest stage in the world. The risk was part of the high. Every car headlight below, every office light across the street felt like an eye watching us. Then, the surveillance became literal. A low, mechanical buzzing sound cut through the silence, hovering just outside the glass. I opened my eyes and froze. Hovering 10 feet away from the window, buffeted by the high winds, was a drone. Its green navigation lights blinked rhythmically, and beneath its rotors, a camera lens rotated, focusing directly on us. "Victoria," I hissed, gripping her shoulders. "Outside. A drone." She whipped her head around, her eyes widening as she saw the mechanical spy. It hovered there like a giant insect, recording the CEO in a compromising position with her assistant. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced the haze of desire. "Blackwood," she spat, realizing the trap. "He knew he couldn't win in the boardroom, so he sent a camera to catch me in a scandal." If that footage leaked, she was finished. We scrambled off the chair, dropping to the floor to crawl beneath the sight line of the window, our movements frantic and undignified. We huddled behind the solid oak panel of her desk, breathing hard, listening to the buzzing fade as the drone repositioned. But the threat inside was worse. Just as the drone noise receded, the outer door to the reception area chimed. Ping. Someone had used a key card. Footsteps, soft, hesitant, clicked on the marble floor of the waiting room. "The cleaners?" I whispered. Victoria shook her head, her face pale. "Cleaners come at midnight. That's a guest pass." We heard a woman's voice call out, slightly slurred. "Simon? Are you in there? You said you left your phone." It was Evelyn Blackwood, Simon's wife. She was looking for her husband, likely drunk from the post-meeting cocktails. She tried the handle of the office door. It was locked. "Hello?" Evelyn called out, jiggling the handle violently. "I see the lights on inside. Victoria?" We were trapped. The drone was outside the window, waiting for us to stand up. The rival's wife was at the door, demanding entry. If she saw us disheveled, hiding on the floor, the rumor mill would destroy us by morning. Victoria looked around wildly, her eyes landing on the inconspicuous, panel-matched door in the wall behind her desk, the temperature-controlled server archive. She grabbed my hand, squeezing it hard. "The archive," she mouthed. "Go!" We slipped into the server archive just as the main office door clicked open, the magnetic lock overridden by a master key. The heavy, insulated steel door of the server room sealed us inside with a pneumatic hiss, plunging us into a world of sensory shock. The temperature dropped 30 degrees in an instant. The room was a narrow, windowless corridor lined with towering racks of black servers, their blue and green status lights blinking in the darkness like the eyes of deep-sea creatures. The roar of the cooling fans was deafening, a constant, industrial white noise that vibrated in my teeth. Victoria leaned back against the cold metal door, sliding down until she hit the raised floor tiles. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering violently, not just from the sudden freeze, but from the adrenaline crash. The Iron Lady facade had shattered. In the blue gloom, she looked small, fragile, and utterly human. "He won't stop," she said, her voice barely audible over the fans. "Blackwood won't stop until I'm humiliated. Until I'm nothing." She looked up at me, mascara smudged beneath her eyes, stripped of her armor. "I have no one, Alex. I go home to an empty house. I have millions in the bank, and I'm hiding in a freezer with my assistant because he's the only person who hasn't tried to stab me in the back today." I didn't answer with words. I took off my suit jacket, the fabric still warm from my body, and draped it over her trembling shoulders. I sat down beside her on the cold floor, pulling her into my side. She didn't resist. She collapsed into me, burying her face in my shirt, seeking warmth. It was a moment of profound, dangerous intimacy that went far beyond the physical. I was comforting the most powerful woman in the industry like a child. "You're not nothing," I said, my voice firm near her ear. "You built this. You built all of this. And we're going to save it." I reached into my pocket to turn off my phone, severing my connection to the outside world, to my friends, to any escape plan I might have had. I was all in. I was risking my career, my reputation, potentially my freedom, for her. She looked up, surprised by the gesture, and touched my cheek. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why are you doing this? I treat you like furniture most days." "Because," I admitted, looking at her lips, "furniture doesn't get to see the real you." We were about to kiss, a real kiss this time, when I shifted my weight and my elbow knocked against the glass panel of the nearest server rack. Beep, beep, beep. A red light began to flash on the ceiling. A robotic voice announced, "Perimeter breach. Sector 4. Unauthorized biological presence." I had triggered the motion sensor for the secure archive. "Damn it," Victoria cursed, standing up. "Security will be here in 60 seconds. Blackwood controls the night shift. If they find us in here—" "Look," I interrupted, pointing at the monitor embedded in the rack I had bumped. The screen hadn't gone to sleep. It was running a background transfer. The file name at the top of the progress bar read, Project Olympus Asset Liquidation, S. Blackwood. Victoria gasped, leaning in. "That's it," she whispered, her eyes widening. "That's the file. He's been siphoning funds from the R&D budget to a shell company. He was trying to delete the evidence while the servers were rebooting during his sabotage earlier." The transfer was paused at 98%. Bang, bang, bang. Fists pounded on the heavy steel door of the archive. "Open up!" a deep voice bellowed. It wasn't standard security. It was Blackwood's private contractor. "We know you're in there." We had the evidence that could end the war, but we were trapped in a steel box with the enemy at the gate. Victoria looked at the progress bar, then at the door, which was beginning to vibrate as they applied a crowbar to the seam. She looked at me. "Can you run?" she asked, a spark of the old fire returning to her eyes. "Run where?" I asked, eyeing the only other exit, a heavy maintenance hatch in the ceiling labeled roof access. "To the helipad," she said, grabbing a flash drive from the server console and jamming it into the port. "My chopper is on standby for the commute home. If we get to the roof before they break that door down, we fly. If we don't—" She didn't finish. The door groaned, metal screeching against metal. A beam of flashlight cut through the widening crack. "Boost me," she commanded, kicking off her heels. "We're taking the stairs to the sky." The wind on the rooftop was a physical force, a gale that tore at our clothes and whipped Victoria's hair across her face as we scrambled out of the maintenance hatch onto the gravel surface of the helipad. The deafening roar of the Sikorsky S-70 SIXS rotors drowned out the city below, its blades cutting through the night air like giant scythes. We ran toward the waiting aircraft, crouched low, the blue landing lights washing us in a ghostly, surreal glow. I gripped Victoria's hand, pulling her forward, the flash drive containing the evidence of Blackwood's embezzlement burning a hole in my pocket. We were 10 yards from the open cabin door when the hatch behind us burst open. Simon Blackwood emerged, flanked by his 2 private security contractors. He didn't look like a board member anymore. He looked like a desperate animal. He didn't have a weapon, but the sheer rage on his face was lethal enough. "Stop!" he screamed, his voice barely audible over the turbine whine. "You walk away with that drive, Victoria, and I will burn this company to the ground. I will ruin you." He lunged forward, ignoring the safety perimeter, his eyes locked on the woman he had tried to destroy. Victoria stopped. She didn't run. She turned to face him, releasing my hand to stand alone against the wind and the man who had tormented her for a decade. She looked disheveled, shoeless, and exhausted, but in that moment, she was a titan. She reached into my pocket, her fingers brushing my hip, and pulled out the flash drive. She held it up, letting the strobe lights of the helicopter catch the metal casing. "You're already ash, Simon," she shouted back, her voice steady and amplified by the sudden dip in the wind. "This isn't a negotiation. It's a funeral. Yours." She didn't wait for his retort. She turned her back on him, the ultimate insult, and climbed into the waiting helicopter. I followed, pulling the heavy door shut and locking it, sealing us inside the quiet, leather-lined cocoon of the cabin. As the pilot lifted off, banking sharply away from the tower, I looked down. Simon Blackwood was just a small, dark speck on the gray concrete, shrinking into irrelevance as we ascended toward the stars. The flight to her private estate in the Hamptons was quiet, the city lights spreading out below us like a circuit board of gold and diamonds. The adrenaline that had fueled our escape began to ebb, replaced by a heavy, intoxicating exhaustion. Victoria sat across from me, her legs curled up on the seat, watching the skyline retreat. She looked at me, really looked at me, stripping away the layers of corporate hierarchy that had separated us for 2 years. She reached across the aisle and took my hand, intertwining her fingers with mine. "You realize you can't go back to the desk," she said, her voice soft through the aviation headset. "They'll know. Everyone will know. I don't want the desk," I replied, squeezing her hand. "I want to know what happens next." She smiled, a genuine, tired smile that reached her eyes. "Next, we clean house. Then, we rewrite the rules." She didn't let go of my hand for the entire flight. We were no longer CEO and assistant. We were partners in a crime that had saved an empire. 1 month later, the elevator doors of Sterling Tech slid shut at exactly 8:50 p.m., cutting off the noise of the celebratory gala happening in the lobby. The board had been purged. Blackwood was facing federal indictment. And I was wearing a suit that cost more than my old car, the newly appointed Director of Special Operations, a vague title that meant I answered only to one person. The cabin began to rise, the city falling away behind the glass just as it had that first night. The air was thick with the same jasmine perfume, but the fear was gone. Victoria stood next to me, watching the floor numbers climb. She wasn't looking at her tablet. She was looking at my reflection in the glass doors. As we passed the 40th floor, she didn't say a word. She simply reached out and hit the red emergency stop button. The elevator shuddered to a halt, suspending us once again in the void between earth and sky. "Mrs. Sterling," I said, a playful smirk touching my lips as I turned to face her. "We're going to be late for your keynote speech." "The speech can wait," she murmured, stepping into my space, her hands finding the lapels of my jacket with practiced familiarity. She pushed me back against the glass wall, the city lights framing her silhouette like a halo of electric fire. "I need to calibrate my focus. And my new director needs a performance review." She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small, heavy object, the gold Mont Blanc pen she had kicked under the table during the board meeting, the trophy of our first victory. She slid it into my breast pocket, her fingers lingering over my heart. "You have 10 minutes, Alex," she whispered, leaning up to bite my lower lip. "Make me invincible again." I wrapped my hands around her waist, pulling her flush against me as the rest of the world ceased to exist. We weren't hiding anymore. We were ruling. And the only button that mattered was the one that kept the doors closed.